The United States pulls more oil out of the ground than any other country on Earth. Yet, if you've been to a gas station recently, you know it doesn't feel that way. For years, politicians have promised that achieving energy independence would build a fortress around the American economy, insulating us from chaos overseas. Then came the 2026 conflict between the US, Israel, and Iran. The fighting essentially closed down the Strait of Hormuz. To put that in perspective, that single narrow waterway handles roughly 1/5 of the entire world's oil supply, and almost overnight, that flow stopped. The domestic impact was immediate. Average fuel prices in the US ripped right past $4 a gallon. Geography has a way of forcing the issue. We have vast reserves beneath our own soil, but a bottleneck thousands of miles away is still dictating what it costs to drive to work. Economists call this the rockets and feathers phenomenon. On this cost graph, watch the rocket in action. When a crisis hits, gas prices shoot upward vertically. But when the crisis resolves, the price behaves like a feather, floating downward at an agonizingly slow pace. This means the damage to the American driver is already done. Even if a ceasefire were signed tomorrow and the strait fully reopened, consumers are locked into paying inflated prices for months to come. It is easy to look at the sheer scale of American drilling and refining infrastructure and wonder why any of this is happening. We produce enough crude to meet our own needs. The issue is that oil isn't a nationalized resource. It is a globally traded commodity, and commodity markets do not care about national borders or domestic loyalty. When 20% of the world's oil suddenly vanishes because of a blockade, buyers in Europe and Asia panic. To keep their economies running, they aggressively bid up the price of whatever oil is still available anywhere in the world. American oil companies are businesses. If an overseas buyer is willing to pay a massive premium for a barrel of crude, the American producer will sell it to them. They aren't going to offer a hometown discount to local gas stations. So energy independence is strictly a production metric. It means we pull a lot of oil out of the ground, but it offers zero protection against a global bidding war. The US government has an emergency backup plan, the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. These massive storage sites hold hundreds of millions of barrels of crude oil. The reserve was built after the 1979 oil crisis, with the government hollowing out giant salt caverns along the Gulf Coast specifically to act as a stockpile for severe supply shocks. Right now, the Department of Energy is frantically tapping into those caverns, pumping millions of barrels of oil into the market to try and artificially stabilize prices. But the reserve is essentially a financial tourniquet. It is a strictly finite stockpile. It can buy the government some time, but it cannot permanently replace 20% of the global supply. While drivers feel the pain at the pump, the Federal Reserve is looking at this crisis from a much wider, more terrifying macroeconomic angle. Central bankers deal with something called a transitory shock. That is a painful but temporary disruption to the economy, like a sudden spike in oil prices, that the market can eventually absorb and correct on its own. Historically, the Fed has been able to look past a single, isolated shock, trusting that prices will eventually settle. The problem right now is compounding pressure. This chart tracks underlying economic stress. Before the oil crisis even started, the US economy was hit with a new 15% global tariff rate. Now, stack the Middle East oil shock directly on top of it. When sequential shocks hit one right after the other, it breaks standard economic models. Businesses realize costs aren't coming down, so they permanently change their pricing behavior, locking the inflation in place. If that inflation gets stuck while the broader economy stalls out, we enter a state known as stagflation. It is a toxic, miserable economic condition, and it is exactly what crippled the country in the 1970s, back when domestic rationing reached the point where you could only buy gas on certain days, depending on your license plate number. Stagflation creates a vicious cycle. Workers demand higher wages just to survive the rising cost of living, which forces panicked businesses to either freeze hiring entirely or raise their prices even further to cover the new payroll costs. For decades, we drilled and fracked our way into becoming the top oil producer on the planet, assuming that output alone would build an impenetrable wall around our economy. But in a deeply connected global market, true independence is an illusion. We are the largest producer in the world, and we are still entirely vulnerable to the next geopolitical shock.